Welcome to Forgotten Hollywood on Therapy Cable. Here is the Hollywood backstory. Because of his stardom, Sal Mineo was one of the most recognizable faces in the mid to late 1950s and early 1960s. He was also an early champion for the gay community.
Can't tell me nothing no more.
Sal Mineo.
In 1958, Sal Mineo was one of the most popular teen film stars in Hollywood. 18 years later, the 37-year-old actor, practically forgotten and desperate for a comeback, was murdered just off the Sunset Strip.
Tragically, Sal's career was truncated by violence.
Welcome to Forgotten Hollywood, streaming on the Therapy Cable channel. Here's your host, Manny Pacheco.
Welcome to our program. We share America's story through the eyes of character actors from Hollywood's golden age. And of course, we base it all on our book series, a radio show that we air on 90.1 FM KBPK, and we have a documentary series already in production. Sal Mineo's screen credits included Rebel Without a Cause, Giant, Exodus, and The Longest Day. By age 21, he was a two-time Oscar nominee. Just 5 years later, the gifted actor was considered a has-been. Vocal about his bisexuality, the Hollywood backlash resulted in a struggle to secure cinematic employment that lasted until his untimely passing in 1976. His story is poignantly tragic, and it's now being shared in a fabulous two-man show. Today's guest is Dean Ghaffari, the co-star of An Evening with Sal Mineo and Edgar Allan Poe that will be presented at the Fremont Center Theater in South Pasadena, California on July 17th and 18th. Ghaffari began acting in 1993, and he studied in 2001 with Anthony Montez, a recipient of a Dramalog Award. Dean also has taken classes with Lou Diamond Phillips and at the Actors Gang Workshop founded by Academy Award winner Tim Robbins. Welcome to our program, Dean. We appreciate having you here on Forgotten Hollywood on Therapy Cable.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manny, for having me. Thank you.
Before we center on Sal Mineo, explain the dichotomy of Sal Mineo and Edgar Allan Poe.
Wow. Wow.
That is, well, the two wouldn't seem to go together, but they really do well when I was doing my research.
Yes. And I just get a kick out of these guys together. I mean, I think both of them are just like rolling in their graves, just saying An Evening with Sal Mineo and Edgar Allan Poe. I really, to be honest, I really love the idea of just having two people that are just virtual opposites from one another in the same room, even though we're in completely separate acts. But just the idea of these two guys together, I just get a kick out of it. They're both, there are commonalities between the two. They're both, rather dark characters. Sal Mineo, like you mentioned in your opening introduction, was one of the first actors to be, bisexual or openly gay in Hollywood. And Edgar Allan Poe was rather one of the first writers to actually just try to make a living through writing.
And they both died rather young.
Both died rather young, pretty mysterious deaths, I'd say. And both of them were very passionate and stuck to their guns and, were really into their own individual art forms, no matter what people thought.
And both were considered wonderkins in their time. I mean, Sal Mineo was very, very young, and he was considered like a really special up-and-coming actor. Edgar Allan Poe also considered a fine writer while he was alive. Right.
Yeah, and no, absolutely. So they both were very significant in their times and, during their own, separate genres.
Right.
And yeah.
Now, you have portrayed Sal Mineo a number of times. Tell us about what you bring to the table as Sal Mineo.
Wow. Well, I guess I'd probably have to ask the audience that. I mean, I'd like to think that, I'm capturing the essence of Sal Mineo, of who he in fact was. I really can relate to him on many different levels, just wanting to be an actor, his passion for the work, his struggle for the work. So in a way, this piece, when I initially wrote it, really to me was an exercise in self-examination, self-introspection.
Mhm. Now,
And
you just said something really important there. You actually wrote the piece. Tell us about that.
yeah, I wrote the piece. Well, when I was acting, I don't know, maybe I was taking an acting class maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that, a while ago. My acting teacher would say, because biopics were hot at that time, and my acting teacher would say, if you think that you look like somebody, why don't you see if you can play them? Maybe a play or a movie, send a headshot out or something. And I remember I saw Rebel Without a Cause in high school. And the whole time I was actually looking at Sal Mineo because there was just something kind of very ambiguous about him and very mysterious about him. And I didn't think anything of it. And then one day some random person just came up to me and said, I mean, I had to have been maybe 21 at the time or something, a while ago, said, do you know who Sal Mineo is? I said, yeah, from Rebel Without a Cause. And he says, oh, you look like him. So I told my acting teacher, I said, hey, do you think I could play Sal Mineo? And he didn't say anything. He kind of thought about it. And then the next day he brings me a biography on his life. And then it kind of kicked it off from there. And I felt that, I realized that, yeah, he was a two-time Oscar-nominated actor, like you said. He acted with James Dean. He acted with Yul Brynner on Broadway. He was one of the first actors to be openly gay. I mean, and of course, unfortunately, he was murdered, and, there was a rise and fall. So there was a lot of rich material there. It was a complex story, and I felt like trying to adapt it, and really the piece, too, is based on some of my own experience. It is a story on his life, but it is partially fictionalized as well. But so that's really where I was coming from, and I didn't really think anything of it. Other projects came up, other things were happening in my life, and maybe about 10 years later, I decided, or 7 to 10 years later, I decided to put it down on paper, and I did that 3 years ago.
You mentioned that, of course, he was in Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean, but he was also with Richard Beamer in The Longest Day, Paul Newman, and Eva Marie Saint in Exodus. He appeared with Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor in Giant. I mean, he really appeared with a lot of A-listers. I mean, he was really considered an up-and-comer in many respects in the late 50s, early 60s. And, of course, your career, you've been, as I said in the opening, you've worked with Tim Robbins and Lou Diamond Phillips. I mean, it's kind of nice when you're able to work with these folks and consider them mentors.
Yeah, well, I've studied acting with them. I didn't necessarily work with them in the sense that Sal Mineo did, of course. But, absolutely. And the thing is, a lot of the thing that really speaks to me about this piece and really feeds me and gives me a vitality in terms of wanting to explore this character and looking at it through the prism of wanting to be an actor is he really accomplished a lot, and yet he was virtually forgotten. And of course, that's kind of the theme. That is the theme of your show, and I want to get to that because
You're right.
He worked with all the as an actor I would have died to work with Yul Brynner on Broadway and James Dean, and he acted with Paul Newman twice. He did a film called Somebody Up There Likes Me, which I think was directed by Robert Weiss. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Right, about the boxer. Right. Rocky Graciano.
Graciano. Yeah. So he did all this, and he was nominated for 2 Oscars. So yet any actor would die to have those type of achievements. And the sad thing is he was virtually forgotten. And part of the reason why I'm doing this piece is to kind of restore his legacy and get people to know who he is, because he did accomplish so much, like you're saying, and worked with all these great people.
Now, speak to the performance that you give. Do you do some of the readings from some of the movies or the Broadway production, or Do you spend a lot of time with his private life? Talk a little bit about the production that's going to be taking place in South Pasadena later in the month.
Okay. Well, that's a good question. No, I don't necessarily quote lines from his films. I mean, I go through, of course, the most significant films, which was Rebel Without a Cause, and James Dean was a very significant person in his life. So we touch on that. The 2 Oscar nominations, losing the Oscar, that moment, because that really affected him the second time. First time he was just coming up when he lost to Jack Lemmon for Rebel Without a Cause, but when he lost to Peter Ustinov, he really couldn't, rise above that. It really got to him. So I go there and, I really try to capture the essence of who he was. I mean, there's only so much you can compress in an hour of somebody's life, but I get personal. I mean, the coming out and being gay. So I pretty much take the audience on a journey of his life through working with Yul Brynner at 11 years old to Broadway, through James Dean, through coming out, through the rise and the fall, and up into the murder.
Do you would you consider your performance? Is it a real dramatic or an intensely dramatic piece, melodramatic, or are there some comedic elements in your performance?
Well, we were talking. I mean, you and I, we've talked a little on the phone and stuff, and we can go on and on. We're like 2 girls on the phone talking about old movies. I mean,
Well, that's a great way of characterizing it. But yes, go ahead.
It's just like how girls talk about shopping. We're talking about movies, and we can go on and on.
Right.
And we were talking about Sullivan's Travel, a great film, and what we were talking about was so great, the humor that was in it. So it could be whenever you sense the hostile or dramatic moment, Preston Sturges would turn around with humor. So I want to take the audience on a roller coaster of emotion. So yes, there are comedic elements in it, but it is a dramatic piece overall. So my hope is, people laugh and people cry.
And they enjoy the performance. It's funny what you mentioned about the Oscars. And you're right. We have spoken on the phone a couple times. I think I related this story, but I can relate this story to our audience about how in 1960, when he was nominated for the film Exodus, he was up against a formidable group of folks who were up. I mean, anybody really could have won that year. And Chill Wills, who was the actor in the movie The Alamo, was really campaigning hard to become the winner of Best Supporting Actor. And of course, Chill Wills had that back home folksy kind of attitude, calling everybody cousin and family. And he would write personal letters to the actors to vote, and he received a letter back from Groucho Marx saying, "I appreciate being part of your family and being your cousin, but I'm going to vote for Sal Mineo." So I thought Groucho was pretty clever there, and I think Groucho did in fact vote for Sal Mineo. So it was a great performance, and as you said, Peter Ustinov ended up winning for his performance in Spartacus. Sal Mineo had a lot of friends. Natalie Wood and James Dean were 2 very close friends. All 3 died tragically young.
Yes.
Do you draw that parallel in your production?
Well, this piece is really kind of a juxtaposition, and it's told. It's very abstract. So it takes place in 1976.
Right before his death, right?
Yes,
right.
Leading up to it. So I play the older Sal, kind of reflecting on his career. So at that time, Natalie Wood had not passed away.
Right.
So I don't, but of course we get into James Dean, and yes, that is something I have thought about, and it's an interesting parallel.
One of the things that when you did a little research before this interview, and I love letting the audience in, I don't have a problem with that. I sent you over to our interview that we stream here on Therapy Cable of The Children of Giant. And Sal Mineo had a very crucial role in Giant, again with James Dean. Although he and James Dean, I don't know if they had a scene together. I think he worked more closely with Rock Hudson Elizabeth Taylor, but he actually plays one of the Latinos. And I think Sal Mineo really jumped at the opportunity of being able to play an individual who was a pioneering champion for the Latino cause. He liked to take those edgy roles, didn't he?
Oh yes, he did. He did a movie, Teddy Bear, I believe, where he played. I mean, it's ambiguous, but a guy that you don't really know if he's a homosexual or and that's kind of bubbling underneath the surface. And that was a dark role for him. And then he did Fortune in Men's Eyes, which was a play that dealt with homosexual men in a prison. Mm-hmm. So, and he was actually the first actor when he directed it, and he had acted in it, and he actually was one of the first actor, to my knowledge, that's an Oscar-nominated actor to actually be fully nude on stage, and he did that. So
wow.
And so that was very controversial.
And it's sad to think, as you say, he's forgotten.
And don't worry, audience, you're not going to see me nude in there. I'm going
to.
No.
No, I didn't think so. But sad to think that he should be compared in the way he prepared for his roles as Montgomery Clift, James Dean, Marlon Brando, Paul Newman. They were part of that actor's school of thought that they right. Really. But Sal Mineo was that kind of an actor, yet he's not compared in that group.
He's not, and it's very unfortunate, because he started out as a child actor at first, and they would typecast him as these kind of juvenile delinquents, and he did a movie. It was with Mark Rydell, and it was Mark Rydell and John Cassavetes. That's another great person he worked with, of course. I think it was called Crime in the Streets, I believe, and so he did that. And he played a delinquent. So he never really was like that lead, like the Clift, because, you had Montgomery Clift, which was a great actor, leading man, and really had the same, shortcomings and frailties as Sal Mineo. I mean, all of them had tragic endings, unfortunately, with Clift, with the accident. And, and I've heard Dennis Hopper talk about this. Like, there was Brando, there was James Dean, and Clift. And Marlon Brando was kind of like the rebellious guy that just says, screw you. Montgomery Clift was the guy that was just like, help me. And James Dean was somewhere in between that. But Sal Mineo, and I'm going back to the theme, is one of Hollywood's forgotten rebels. And he was a rebel.
What I'd like to do is, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to show a short piece talking about Edgar Allan Poe. I'd like to, when we come back, I'd like you to speak about the actor who plays opposite you, obviously not in the same scenes, but in your play. And of course, we're very happy to present An Evening with Sal Mineo and Edgar Allan Poe, which will be at the South Pasadena Fremont Center Theater. And we're going to talk a little bit about when the performances are. But let's take a look at the life of Edgar Allan Poe here on Forgotten Hollywood on the Therapy Cable.
One of the reasons why Poe speaks to us so clearly is that he constructs a world of uncertainty, a world that's precarious, a world in which one yearns for an afterlife, yearns for some image of heaven to believe in, but is confronted by violence and cruelty. Poe didn't live into the second half of the 19th century, and he couldn't have imagined all of the horrors that have unfolded in the 20th century. But I think there is something in Poe's fiction that looks beyond his own time and guesses what we will face in ours.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
Welcome back to Forgotten Hollywood on Therapy Cable. I'm Manny Pacheco. We are here with Dean Ghaffari, who plays Sal Mineo in a great little piece, a play that's called An Evening with Sal Mineo and Edgar Allan Poe, that'll be playing at the Fremont Theater. And right before the break, that's in South Pasadena, California, by the way. And right before the break, we spoke about the idea of the juxtaposition of Sal Mineo and Edgar Allan Poe. Let's talk a little bit about the other actor, Duffy Hudson, who plays Edgar Allan Poe. Is this just as intense and dark and maybe with some elements of humor? Let's talk about the second half of the play.
Yes. Well, now, Duffy Hudson, really great actor. I didn't really know his work before. We both know a couple like mutual people, and one of my friends was just like, you got to see this guy. I mean, he is great, and he has multiple characters. It's not just Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, he has George Burns. He does very well, and I know maybe the George Burns would have been, but I don't know.
I don't know about Sal Mineo and George Burns, but yes, I understand what you're saying.
He does so many different characters, and I went to see him a few months ago do Edgar Allan Poe, and he was he was mesmerizing. I mean, he got a standing ovation. He gets a standing ovation pretty much all the time. I mean, when he does it. And it's interesting, his performance too, because it's all subjective. Everybody has their own interpretations. But when I saw it, I felt like I was watching that movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I almost felt like I was on an acid trip, because the the paranoia that Poe is going through, and you feel like you're actually like with him, like you're in his head as he's pontificating and experiencing all these things. And so he was just so good. So, I've done Sal Mineo before a few times at different venues. So I wanted to, maybe just do something a little different and
expand
kind of
a little bit, expand the idea. Right.
Yeah. And, shake things up a little bit, and nothing to shake it up more than An Evening with Sal Mineo and Edgar Allan Poe. And
now, does he portray Edgar Allan Poe at right before his death also, like you do?
Yes, he does. And he's, Duffy Hudson, he's done Poe, over 1,000 times. I mean, my play really is in an infancy period compared to Duffy's. So he has a lot of experience, and he's very familiar with it, and he does it well. And actually, there's a museum on Edgar Allan Poe in Fordham, New York, and Duffy's voice is actually featured in the tour of the museum. So he actually does the voice for the museum there. So it's really his signature piece.
Mm-hmm. Speak to us a little bit about the Fremont Center Theater. A good venue for you to perform?
Great venue. It's about maybe 75 seats, and they do a lot of great stuff.
Intimate, very intimate.
Very intimate setting, which I love. The owners, they're very proactive actors. Lisa Reynolds, and it's a great venue. They have a nice little garden, and I think it'll be nice, and just a nice fun evening of pure insanity.
Yeah,
that's why
that's a great way to describe it, right? Now, when are the performances?
Okay, so we're doing it July 17th, which is on a Friday, and July 18th on a Saturday at 8 p.m. The show starts.
Family? Can the whole family come to it?
Well,
more for the mature audiences.
Yes. I think it could be family friendly. I don't know. I guess in my play there's maybe a few curse words, but I'll try to keep it to a minimal if I see any young kids and little kids in the audience.
So you're able to balance that a little bit. Are you going to take the show on the road?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like I said before, this is really, to me, I mean, not only just a performance and a show. I mean, it's a lot deeper than that to me. It is, an exercise in self-introspection. And I just, however I feel, if the opportunity presents itself, then possibly opening it. I would like to take it to New York. That could be a possibility down the line. And Sal is from the Bronx.
Right.
But, I really learned a lot about myself throughout this process. When I initially did it, I was trying to write the monologue about Sal Mineo, being a homosexual and coming out, for the first time. And as a straight man, it was very hard for me to believe, but it was really hard for me to relate to that struggle. So I have a friend that's an openly gay guy, and he came to my house once for dinner, and I asked him, I said, I'm writing this piece about this actor that's coming out, and is there anything you could tell me about like your experiences? And he hesitated for a moment. And there's a little phone ringing in the background.
Okay. That's all
Can
right.
I talk over it?
Yeah, you can talk right over it. Go ahead.
Okay. Anyways, so I asked him, what was it like? What in your experience of being a homosexual? And he said, if it was up to me, Dean, I would be straight. And I was really kind of taken back by that, because this was a very openly gay guy, and that's all he told me, and that's really all he wanted to tell me. And I thought about it. Like I wrote the monologue, but then, I'm thinking, how am I going to find this character in me? Because this is the first time I'm saying that I'm gay, and this is something I never spoke about out loud. And how can I relate to this? And I thought about it. And this is something that it has been difficult for me to say. But if it was up to me, like if I really had a choice, I would not want to be an actor. I mean, why? I mean, you got to be nuts to be an actor, but it's not so much of that. It's the implications that come with it, which are similar implications that maybe gay people have to go through. But thankfully, we've progressed on that issue.
Well, it's a timely piece because of the whole vote that's taken place with the Supreme Court. I think that there's a lot to be said that your performances could be considered very topical, very timely. We're just about out of time. I wish we could spend another hour talking about this, but speak a little to that, to the idea that maybe you're doing something that maybe you may have to do a few more times, just like Duffy, because of the timeliness of the way the nation is going.
Absolutely. I do think it is a very relevant piece. And there's a lot of even Hollywood movies you watch, like the movie Network, for instance. I mean, that movie is still relevant today. And, Sal Mineo, I still think is a very relevant person. And I think this issue is very relevant. And I'm just, I'm just excited. And, it just feels good to be able to wake up and say, I got something to say. And I'm saying it through Sal Mineo. And,
well, if it's any consolation at all, I will tell you that millennials will find your performance very accepting. 80% of millennials have accepted the idea of gay marriage, and so this is a good time to come out with a piece just like this. An Evening with Sal Mineo and Edgar Allan Poe, starring Dean Ghaffari as Sal Mineo and Duffy Hudson as Edgar Allan Poe. Thank you for joining us here on Forgotten Hollywood on Therapy Cable. And thank you all for joining us on Forgotten Hollywood on Therapy Cable. And remember, let's never forget, I'm Manny Pacheco.